Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. In this video we are going to implement triggers, and the triggers are basically used by the database administrator to keep track of every updation and modification to the stored database, and triggers can be executed before or after every event. Events can be insertion, deletion or updation to the database. So let's start the practical with a brief introduction of basic concepts. So triggers are like stored procedures that Oracle database invokes automatically whenever a trigger event occurs. By triggering events we mean that for any insertion, deletion or updation. So we can run the trigger or we can invoke the trigger before or after insertion, deletion or updation. One table, or we can say that one stored database, can have multiple linked triggers. We can create multiple triggers for a database. So everything is this type of structure or linkage is possible. Second point is the trigger always applies to the new data only. Means if you have created a table, means an existing table is having 100 rows or 1000 records, and after that you are creating a trigger. So trigger will be applied to the further transaction, means rows inserted after 1000 rows or rows updated, means updations made after the trigger is created, or the deletion is made after the trigger is created. So all those transactions can be tracked, but not the transaction applied before the trigger was created. Second thing, you need to mention before or after clause, means you want to run trigger before the event or after the trigger. So it is specifying when the trigger fires, either before or after the triggering event. The triggering events can be insert, delete or update. Why we need triggers? Triggers are required to keep the log events, means if you are making some updations, so the earlier record, means the previous records before updation must be kept securely, okay, so that they can be used for the future audits. And they can also gather the statistics on table access, means who has accessed the table, when the record was accessed, and what was the transaction, means the record was accessed by update, delete or any type of changes that the transaction has made, and who has executed that transaction and when the transaction was executed. So every such record can be maintained. Next thing, you can keep track of every data modification, means every version of modified data can be stored in the database. Suppose our data is D1 and you have updated the data to D2. So D1 will be stored in a separate table, and again D2 is modified or updated to data 3, then D2 will also be stored in the database. So you can keep such records for further audits, means for further analysis and further operations. So this storage and this log management, everything will be done by the trigger. You just need to write the trigger and trigger will be invoked automatically. So unlike procedure, you need not to execute the triggers manually. Next, the syntax. So we have the option of creating or replacing the existing trigger, followed by the trigger name. This is user defined name, but here we have the option of before or after, means you want to execute the trigger, invoke the trigger before the event or after the triggering events, and this event can be insert, delete or update, okay, on the table name, means for which you want to write the trigger. And you can write one trigger for one table, but you can have multiple triggers for one table. Next we have the important point is as for each row. Okay, if you are not mentioning this thing, then the default type is statement level, means without this line for each row, the trigger will be executed only once. Okay, trigger is executing automatically, but it will be executed only once. But If you want to keep track of every transaction, every log, every update, every deletion, then you need to mention this for each row. Then it will be invoking the trigger for every row insertion, for every update, for every delete. Okay, so this is for running the trigger for every row operation. Every time one record is inserted, updated or deleted, the trigger will be invoked. Otherwise, by default it will be invoked only once. And next we have the option to enable or disable the trigger. Suppose you want to create the trigger but you are not willing to activate the trigger for the same time, then you can write the disable clause. The default is enable, means if you are not writing anything, the trigger is by default enabled. Okay, next we have the declaration and the begin section. So here in declaration section you can declare the variables, and begin section you can write the queries or anything you want to execute. So this is the executable section, right? Next, the things that I have excluded from the syntax are: one, after this executable section you can have the exception handling, means you can mention your exception for which you are not willing to invoke the trigger. So you can mention the exception, and here you can also write the when clause. When followed by a condition means for which condition the trigger must be invoked, should be invoked. So I am not using these two cases in this session, so I have excluded these two conditions from the syntax. Next we have, if you want to drop the trigger like procedure, views or tables, you need to write drop trigger followed by the trigger name, and the trigger will be deleted from the database, from your system. Next thing, if you have a table, okay, this is our table, and you have two triggers for this table, trigger 1 and trigger 2. You will write drop trigger 1, then the trigger 1 will be deleted, means the trigger 1 is dropped from the database. But if you drop the table, means if I am writing like this, drop table name. So if the table is deleted, then all the related triggers will be deleted automatically, means you can delete individual triggers, but if the table is deleted, all the triggers will be dropped automatically. You can check this by running the queries. So next we have this example, means the sample table that we are going to use for today's example or today's practical is employee table with 4 fields: employee number, employee name, salary and department, and we are going to use before clause for the insert and update transaction. Means this clause must be run, this trigger must be invoked before every insertion or updation. And for this example we are going to check two conditions. First is, for every insertion or updation, salary must be greater than 0, means if you are trying to insert a record with salary as 0, it should not be inserted to the table. Second thing, if you are trying to update the existing record and salary is, you are trying to update the salary to 0, in that case also the trigger must show an error. Okay, and the record must not be updated or inserted if the salary is less than equal to 0. Next thing, I also want to keep a copy of every new record inserted. Suppose someone in your database has deleted the table, so there must be a copy of your table. So our second requirement is we must maintain a copy, means we must create another table as employee underscore copy that can keep every updated record and every new inserted record as well as backup. So this will be our backup table. So for that you will be creating a new table, employee copy. All the fields are same as the employee table. The difference is it will be automatically updated or we can say that rows will be automatically updated or inserted into this backup table by the trigger. So trigger will check for the salary condition. If that condition is satisfied, means salary is greater than 0, then the record will be inserted into the table, into the employee table, as well as to the backup table. Second thing, if you are updating something, means if you are updating we can say the salary to 20,000, then a new record, means existing record will not be deleted, because we are writing, or we can say that we are writing the executable command in the trigger like this. A new entry will be inserted with employee ID as 111. One second. With employee ID as 111, same name is A, but this time the updated entry will be stored. Okay, so it is going to insert a new row to the backup table, but in the employee table only the existing record will be updated. Okay, we will be writing such type of trigger. So let's start with the practical demonstration. Here I am going to write the commands in this Word file, then we will be using the copy paste to run the command, because the commands are easy to edit and update, modify in this mode. So here I am going to create the employee table with employee number, e-name, salary and the department that we discussed in the slide. So let's run this command. So the table is created successfully. Now let's run the insertion check only, then we will move to the update command and we will move to the backup table. So let's run the initial trigger only. So I have written this trigger, create or replace the trigger, and I have named it as employee trigger 1, employee underscore trigger 1. Before insert or update, okay, before every insert or update on employee table, for each row I want to check, means for each row, otherwise it would be of statement level. So I must write for each row I want to check. For each row begin, what I want to check, simple if condition that the new inserted salary must not be less than equal to 0. So if the new salary is less than equal to 0, then it will raise, means trigger will raise an error and the further executable section will not be executed, means the transaction will be cancelled. It will not be inserting or updating the record in the database. So here you need to raise an system application error, and this error function having required two required parameters. First is error number. So this error number is specifying the number or identification of the error, and this number may range from -20999 to -20,000. Okay, and followed by a message. This message is user defined message. So I have put the message that salary cannot be less than 0. You can put any other message of your choice. Next, this is the built-in function raise application error, and what it will do, first of all it will cancel the transaction and it will show this message after the user execute the transaction. Okay, and the transaction will not be executing and it will not be updating any record in the database. And this is the simple if condition. Next, you need to understand the keyword new that I have written here like this. So whenever you are dealing with attribute in the trigger, okay, so you can have two type of we can say that clause with the attribute. Like here I can have new dot salary, or I can have old dot salary. I can have new dot employee number, new dot e-name. So this type of new or old you must be using with every attribute name of the table for which you are writing the trigger. okay, for which you are mentioning the trigger. So here new means for every insert operation you are going to have a new entry. Okay, so new salary will be inserted, new employee number will be inserted, new department number, and new everything will be new. So here the you are going to mention the salary as new dot salary. But if you are updating a record, suppose I am updating a record from 10,000 salary to 20,000, in that case you can check whether the salary the new updated salary must be greater than the old salary. So such type of condition you can use in trigger before updating the record. Okay, I have not mentioned this condition, but I am just discussing to clear the concept of new and old. So in that case you can check that old dot salary should not be, or we can say that new salary should be greater than old salary. Only then the record should be updated. So such condition can be used in the trigger. And to mention two records means I have written update query, update salary to 20,000. Then in that case 20,000 can be referred with the new keyword, and the old and the previous entry of the salary is referred with the old keyword. Okay, so the old salary should be greater than new salary. But in case of insertion, as I am not checking this condition in the trigger for time being, so here we can say that the new entry, every entry for insert command is going to be a new entry. That's why I am mentioning here as the new. So new dot salary, and I have also used this colon. If you can see, I have used this colon. So this colon is indicating a reference, because this salary is not the variable declared within this trigger. So this is just to define a reference, that I am referring an entry from the employee table. I am referring an attribute from the employee table. So this column is just to refer the attribute from the table. Okay, so let's run this trigger and check by trying to insert a new record. So the trigger is created successfully. Note here one thing: if the table employee would not exist, then it's going to show the error that trigger is created with compilation error. Means you are going to write a trigger, but the corresponding table is not existing, then it will show the compilation error. So let's try to insert some record to employee table. Employee values, e-name as A, salary as 0. I am intentionally keeping the field as 0, and department say CSC. Okay, so here we got the error that salary cannot be less than 0, and the same line we have mentioned in the trigger, salary cannot be 0, and it has raised the system error. So I have mentioned this number, you can write 20,000 as well. So these errors belongs to such type of conditions. So these are the error codes, they have their own meaning. So here we got the error, and the record is not inserted to the table. You can check by listing the table rows. So no row is selected. So this system error has cancelled the transaction, and the record is not inserted, and we got the error. Okay, so let's try to insert again, but this time we are fulfilling the condition, means we have not entered the salary as 0. So that's why the record is successfully inserted to the trigger. Trigger has run, but the condition was satisfied, so the record is inserted into the table. Okay, so our next requirement is you can also try to update. So let's try to update as well. Update employee set salary equals to 0, where, because the trigger is for both events, means insertion as well as for the updation, where e number equals to 111. This time also we are going to get the same error. Salary cannot be less than 0. So it is not going to update your record. So updation will not be done. Okay. So this is the way how the triggers work. So let's update the trigger. But before updating, now our second requirement was we need to keep the entries in a backup table. So I need to create the backup table first. So I am going to create a copy of this. So with the same requirements, because I need to keep a entry, means need to keep a backup in the copy table for every insert and update. So I am going to create a copy table. Firstly you need to create the table, only then trigger will insert the entries to this backup table. Okay, so table must be created earlier before writing the trigger. So let's update the trigger. So if the condition is okay, so if the condition is satisfied, means if the salary is not less than 0, then the record must be inserted to the employee table. So it will not interrupt any insertion to the employee table if the condition is not raising any error. So we need to, but also side by we also want to insert the record parallelly to the copy table. So we will be updating the table, updating the trigger with this, means insert into employee copy values. This time we want to insert new employee number, new employee name, new salary and new department to employee copy, means backup table as well. So every entry, every updated entry and every new inserted record must also be updated to the backup table. So let's replace the trigger, existing trigger. So the existing trigger is updated. This time we have another condition for entering the records to every inserted record must also be inserted to the employee table. Okay. So let's see what we already have in the employee table. We have only one row in the employee table. So let's insert some more rows to the employee table. Or we can just delete the existing rows so that we can have a complete backup of our table. So I am just deleting the record, delete from employee. So all the records, all the rows, existing rows are deleted from the employee table. So let's try to insert okay. So the row is inserted into the table employee and trigger runs in the background, and as the condition was satisfied, means salary is not less than 0. So the row is inserted to both tables, to employee as well as to the backup table, means employee copy table. So let's try to insert one more row, then we will check the entries to the both tables. This time I am going to insert employee record with employee number this, and let's change the department as well, department change to IT. So the two records are inserted to employee table. Let's insert one more record, this time for this, and if we are trying to insert the salary as 0, again our trigger will be invoked and it will show the error. Okay, so salary cannot be less than 0. So let's update the insertion. Okay, so the row is inserted successfully. So we have inserted 3 rows to the employee table. Let's see whether the rows are also inserted to our backup table or not. So this is the employee table. So let's check our backup table. rows are also inserted parallelly to the copy table. Okay, so let's try to update something. This is the this was the queries where we have just performed the insertion. So let's try to update something and see the results. So let's try to update a record. Update emp set salary equals to, if you try to set the salary to 0, then it's going to show you the error. So I'm not going to do that. The trigger will be invoked automatically for update and insertion, where e number is equals to 111. Okay, so one row is updated. Now what should happen? The row is updated for the employee table, means this 10,000 is updated to 55,000, but for the copy table the row is not updated, means inserted row is not updated. Rather, we will be having a new entry, a new row for the copy table. It's not going to update the record. It will be making a new copy because we have the same command, means in our trigger we have the insertion query, not the updation query. So for the backup table, for employee copy table, a new record will be inserted instead of updating the existing record. So let's see the output. Select star from employee and the salary is updated to 55,000, but in the employee copy we are having a new entry. Same way, for new insertion the records will be inserted to both tables, but as we have written the trigger in this way, so for every updation the record is updated, existing record is updated for the employee table, but a new entry will be made for we can say that copy table or your backup table. Okay, so let's try to update something else. Let's try to update the name. E name equals to, let's change it to X again, where roll number is this. Okay, where roll number is this, and the row is updated. Let's check the entries. So for employee table the name is changed from A to X, but for employee copy we have another entry in the table. Okay, so our backup table is always going to have a new entry for every insertion and updation. So we are having 3 entries. So it is clearly showing that 111 means employee with 111 was earlier named as A, but this time with new record it is X with a new salary of 50,000. Okay, so in next video we will be having, as in this video we just used the before clause for insert and update. In the next video we will see how we can run the trigger for after clause, means after every update or delete the changes are made in the table, and how we can cater those cases. So that's it for this video. See you in the next video. Till then, bye and take care.